You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The glint of the barrel, that metallic blink in the dimness, signaled the precise moment my mundane detour curdled into something lethal. Mistaken identity felt too soft a term. I hadn't grasped then, not truly, that this spieling motel room, adrift in the vast American nowhere, was about to host a spectacle dredged from the deepest reservoirs of nightmare. It was meant to be transient, a mere pause for breath on a relentless eastward drive. The dusty cactus motor inn, a sun-bleached skeleton from a forgotten highway era, offered little solace but promised affordability. Fatigue was my justification, a flimsy shield against the palpable neglect. The night manager, a fossil fuse to his flickering cathode ray tube, slid the key for room 11 across the scarred counter without diverting his gaze. "Checkout's 11, he mumbled, already swallowed again by the siren song of late-night commerce. My duffel bag bit into my shoulder as I navigated the fractured asphalt sea of the parking lot. Above, the neon vacancy sign stuttered, bathing the weathered doors in a sickly, intermittent rose light. Somewhere nearby, a feline shriek ripped the stillness, making my nerves jump. Room 11 exhaled stale air and the ghosts of countless cigarettes. Wallpaper curled like ancient parchment. The bed sagged with the memory of decades. Still, it was horizontal. That was the extent of my requirement. Bag dropped, boots kicked aside. I was poised to surrender to the lumpy mattress when the sound reached me. Voices low and serrated with anger, slicing the night air outside. Innate curiosity, that treacherous impulse, drew me toward the window. Through a sliver in the grimy floral curtains, I saw them. 3 figures clustered near a hulking black SUV. Even the poor light couldn't obscure the frantic energy, the sharp, urgent gestures accompanying their hushed dispute. "This wasn't the plan," one voice rasped, tight with frustration. "We need to vanish, melt away." "Melt?" Another shot back, incredulous. "With half the state troopers sniffing our exhaust, we need to move, right damn now." I leaned fractionally closer, straining, and my elbow found the spindly bedside table. The cheap lamp perched atop it oscillated wildly before plummeting, shattering the quiet with a crash that seemed to echo across the entire county. Outside, the voices choked into silence. I froze, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. "Just the wind," I prayed. "Or that damn cat." Futile hope. Heavy treads crunched on gravel, closing on my door. I barely had time to recoil from the window before the flimsy wood exploded inward. 2 of them filled the frame, darkness silhouetted, metal gleaming dully in their fists. "Well now," the taller one purred, his voice like chipped ice. "Seems we flushed out a little mouse listening at the walls." My hands flew up, palms out. I fought to keep the tremor from my voice. "Look, this is a mistake," I'm just passing through. Didn't hear a thing. Spare us, the shorter one snapped, his impatience a palpable force. He jerked his head towards the violated doorway. Outside. Move. They propelled me across the parking lot, back toward the waiting SUV. The third man stood there, arms crossed, a deep furrow carved between his brows. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping over me like a searchlight. "Found him playing spy," Tall Ice reported, "in room 11. The third man's eyes narrowed, pinning me. Room 11? Impossible. That room was booked. Clean. For us. A cold dread seeped into my bones, solidifying the abstract fear into sharp-edged reality. These weren't just ill-tempered thugs. They were fugitives anticipating sanctuary. And I, through sheer dumb luck, had checked into their designated haven. "Please," I managed, the word thin. "It's a misunderstanding. I'm not involved, just a traveler needing a bed." "Quiet," the third man commanded. He radiated authority. "Check him." Rough hands violated my pockets, extracting my wallet. It was flipped open. My driver's license subjected to scrutiny under the weak parking lot lights. Elias Thorne, Tall Ice read, from Illinois. The leader's stare bored into me. "That your name? Or something you picked up?" "It's me," I insisted, desperation fraying the edges of my voice. "I swear, I don't know anything about whatever this is. I'm driving to the East Coast. New job. I have the offer letter right here." "Enough!" The leader cut me off sharply. He addressed the other two. "Get him in the vehicle. We're leaving." Panic erupted, hot and suffocating. "Wait, no. You can't just take me. Someone will know I'm gone. The clerk." A dry, mirthless chuckle escaped the leader. "Believe me, friend. By the time anyone wonders about Elias Thorne, we'll be ghosts. And you better pray you're just as clueless as you look." They forced me into the back seat, Tall Ice. Rook, I'd later learn his name was, crowding in beside me. The other two, Silas the leader and Finch the impatient one, took the front. As the SUV surged out of the lot, tires spitting gravel, I saw the night manager through the office window. His face still bathed in the television's blue glow, utterly oblivious. We drove into oblivion. Hours bled together, the sparse lights of civilization yielding to an immense, featureless darkness that pressed against the windows. I tried to fix landmarks, track turns, but the high desert night swallowed every detail. Eventually, we lurched onto an unpaved track, bouncing violently for miles until pulling up before a skeletal cabin. It listed sideways, windows blind with plywood, looking less abandoned than deceased. Inside was swift, brutal. Silas flicked a switch. A single bare bulb flared overhead, carving the dust-choked interior into harsh planes of light and shadow. A table, two mismatched chairs, a derelict couch. "Sit," Silas ordered, gesturing to a chair. I obeyed, sinking onto the unsteady wood. He stood over me, his face an unreadable mask. "All right, Elias Thorne from Illinois. Time to tell us who you really are. Who sent you? And for your own health, you better be convincing." My thoughts scrambled like panicked birds. They suspected I was opposition, a plant, law enforcement, a rival. The simple, ludicrous truth, an ordinary man caught in the crossfire of bad timing, felt impossibly thin. Yet fabrication seemed a faster route to a shallow desert grave. So, the truth spilled out. The tedious data entry job back home. The unexpected tech opportunity in Boston. The decision to make the drive an odyssey. A last look at the country before the new chapter. I even mentioned Clara, the girl I'd left. Our pact to bridge the distance with hope and fiber optics. I watched their faces as I spoke. Silas remained stone, but in Rook's and Finch's expressions, faint glimmers of uncertainty flickered. Perhaps the sheer banality of my story was working. Silence stretched when I finished, thick with dust motes dancing in the stark light. Then Silas spoke, his voice flat. "If that's the gospel truth, and that's a big if, friend, then you've stepped in the worst possible luck." I could only nod, my throat too tight for words. He paced a short line. "But here's the snag. We can't just cut you loose. You've seen faces. You know we were here. Even if you're just some random nobody, that's exposure we can't afford." My stomach plummeted. This was it, the end of the line, buried beneath sand and scrub. But then Rook shifted beside me. "Boss, what if we keep him? For now. Just till things cool off, till we make the drop, then we dump him somewhere remote. By the time he finds his way back to talk, we're vapor." Silas considered it, his gaze unwavering on my face. "And if he bolts? Or if he ain't? The innocent traveler he claims." Rook shrugged, a slight movement. "Then we handle it. But this way. Maybe we don't snuff some civilian just 'cause he picked the wrong motel room." I held my breath, hope a fragile butterfly in my chest. An eternity seemed to pass under Silas's scrutiny before he gave a curt nod. "Fine. But he's your problem, Rook. He makes a wrong move, it lands on you." Relief crashed over me, so potent it was nauseating, immediately chased by a fresh tide of fear. I wasn't dead yet, but I was now a captive, shackled to violent men involved, in God knew what, for an indefinite, terrifying duration. The following days became a montage of frayed nerves and stifling confinement. We drifted like tumbleweeds, never settling, shifting from one derelict shell to another. Abandoned farmhouses, boarded up stores. I pieced together their story. A heist, audacious and valuable, gone sideways. Rare gemstones ripped from a private vault. The ensuing manhunt was relentless, forcing them deeper into hiding while they awaited a buyer. I was never alone, always under guard, a constant reminder of my precarious existence. They remained wary, but the forced proximity began to erode some of the initial hostility. Silas remained remote, but Rook occasionally offered a gruff word, and Finch, surprisingly, became almost talkative in his anxiety. It was Finch who sketched the details of the theft, meant to be clean, surgical, but tripped alarms had turned it into a frantic escape. Listening to him, a desperate seed of an idea began to germinate in the barren soil of my fear. Risky, bordering on suicidal, but it felt like the only path back to my own life. Night 5 found us squatting in the husk of an old roadside gas station. Silas and Rook had ventured out, chasing whispers of their contact, leaving Finch as my warden. I waited, muscles coiled, until his attention snagged on the crackling police scanner they kept perpetually murmuring. Then I moved, a lunge not for escape, but for the pistol jammed into his waistband. He reacted faster than I anticipated. A blur of motion, and we were suddenly a tangle of limbs on the grimy concrete floor. He was wiry, strong with adrenaline, but I fought with the ferocity of the cornered. My hands scrabbled, fingers closing blindly around the checkered grip. A deafening explosion rocked the small space. Finch went suddenly, unnervingly still beneath me. I scrambled backward, horror blooming as a dark stain blossomed on his shirt front. I hadn't intended the trigger. It wasn't a conscious pull, but regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. Headlights swept across the boarded windows, Silas and Rook returning. My hands, slick with sweat and shaking violently, fumbled for the SUV keys lying on the counter. Then I ran. The engine roared to life, and I fled into the pre-dawn darkness, driving on pure adrenaline, eyes glued to the rearview mirror, expecting the vengeful glare of headlights at any second. None appeared. As the first pale streaks of dawn painted the eastern sky, I risked pulling into a desolate truck stop, the payphone a relic from another time. My fingers trembled, dialing 911. The aftermath was a maelstrom. Disorienting hours of statements, federal agents, flashing cameras. The gems were located, Silas and Rook apprehended. The news painted me a reluctant hero. I felt nothing heroic, only scoured out, irrevocably altered. A survivor who'd walked through a furnace and emerged smelling of smoke. Years have passed. The memory surfaces sometimes, unbidden. Those 5 days, a stark reminder of the hairline crack between the ordinary world and the abyss. How swiftly normalcy can shatter. I move through life with a different cadence now, more attuned to the peripheral shadows, the spaces where civilization frays. But there's gratitude too, sharp and clear, for the mundane blessings, quiet nights, unlocked doors, the simple freedom of the road. And whenever I pass some forgotten motor inn, crumbling by the highway, a silent acknowledgement passes through me, a thanks for just passing by. Because you never truly know which door, opened idly, might lead not to rest but to the fight of your life. Fear isn't my default setting, not by a long shot, but a peculiar tension coils low in my gut whenever I pass the vacant storefront flanking my own. I recall the brittle optimism of my first day here, keys jangling, the scent of fresh paint sharp in my rented space. Elias Thorne, purveyor of office necessities, it had a ring to it. My modest shop nestled on a bustling thoroughfare felt like a solid start. Yet that same afternoon, my gaze snagged on the neighboring unit, its panes filmed with grime, a phantom outline marking where signage once clung. Whispers circulated. The previous occupant, a Mr. Abernathy, had simply evaporated months prior, leaving behind only silence and peeling paint. Initially, it registered merely as dereliction, splintered shelves visible through the murk, a testament to abandoned commerce. Now, a mere sideways glance provokes a prickle beneath my skin. My business, Thorne's Supplies, is compact but curated. Stacks of printer reams, regimented rows of pens, the satisfying heft of staplers. Display stands angled towards the street-facing glass, catching the eyes of passing students from the nearby technical college or the occasional office drone seeking refuge from corporate blandness. The rhythm is predictable. Unlock at 9, secure the premises by 7. Prime location, decent footfall. Still, emerging into the midday sun for a breath of air, my eyes inevitably drift left towards that dormant space. Logic offers no anchor for this compulsion. Perhaps a flicker of hope that someone, anyone, has finally come to cleanse it. But no, always the same tableau. Hazy windows, the canted geometry of broken shelving, spectral posters shedding papery skin onto the glass. Through the daylight grime, motes of dust perform slow ballets in the captured sunbeams. Sometimes, the shapes resolve into empty cartons scattered across the floor. Those boxes possess a strange stillness. Some agape, others seal tight, perpetually undisturbed, or so it seems in the clarity of day. Faint impressions sometimes mar the dust near the threshold. Impossible to discern if they are mine from a hesitant peek, remnants of Abernathy, or the casual imprint of some passerby drawn too close by morbid curiosity. My scrutiny is brief. There are customers to greet, stock to replenish, the small universe of my own shop demanding attention. But twilight shifts the lens. Come 7, as I secure my shop, the avenue breathes differently, less frantic, yet far from asleep. Figures hurry towards bus stops. Silhouettes vanishes into the warm glow of a nearby cafe. The metal security gate rattles down over my glass door, its lock clicking with finality. Turning left, I begin the short trek to my parked car, a block distant. And that's when I must pass it. Street lights cast oblique, weak illumination onto its window, rendering the interior a realm of suggestion rather than sight. Vague masses, the hulking shoulders of shelves, the dusty cubes of those inert boxes. Even so, a coolness traces my spine. My arms stiffen involuntarily. My pace quickens. It was perhaps 2 weeks after settling in that I first noticed them. Peculiar glints of light as I passed by after dark. Not searing flashes, but something more furtive. A pulse, a flicker, like the brief illumination of a phone screen waking in absolute blackness. One evening stands stark, closing rituals complete, walking past. A sudden transient glimmer winked from the depths, as if a tiny torch flared and died. I halted. The silence pressed in, amplifying the thrumming in my ears. Only the distant drone of traffic, the impatient bleat of a car horn blocks away, broke the stillness. A visceral urge to press my face to the cold, dirty glass warred with a knot of pure dread tightening in my chest. The dread won. I walked on, rationalizing. A reflection, surely, or the sweep of headlights from the street. Thereafter, haste became my nightly companion. Locking up became a rushed procedure, the alarm system armed with fumbling speed, all to minimize the time spent near that neighboring void. Evasion, however, proved a flimsy shield. The next time, morbid curiosity compelled a glance into the nocturnal gloom. The fine hairs on my nape prickled. Deep within the store's recesses, near the back wall, I could have sworn I saw it again. The barest phosphorescence, like a thumb tapping a screen alive. Gone in an instant, but it stole my breath. Panic fluttered. A squatter? Logic offered this possibility, yet the doors and windows remained stubbornly intact, seemingly locked tight. No splintered wood. No telltale marks of forced entry. One evening stretched late, closer to 8:30. Inventory reconciliation. A tedious recount of ink cartridges after a supplier's error left my back aching. I locked the shop, the rolling gate groaning its descent, and turned to face the silent neighbor. Frustration momentarily eclipsed fear. If someone was illicitly inside, wasn't it my duty to inform the landlord, perhaps the authorities? Emboldened, I stepped closer, placing a hand flat against the grimy pane for balance. The glass felt slick, cold. I strained to penetrate the profound darkness within. Nothing stirred. Then a sound, sharp, distinct, a quick scrape like something being dragged momentarily across the floorboards. I recoiled, stumbling back against my own gate, the metal jarring my shoulder. My heart hammered against my ribs. Shamefully, I admit, I pivoted and walked swiftly away, investigation abandoned. The Navy arrived several days later. A large shipment had necessitated staying until 10. Exhausted and eager for home, I locked up, walked halfway down the block, then swore softly. A crucial folder of invoices lay forgotten on my counter. My car, parked further away than usual due to a lack of closer spaces, meant keys were already in hand as I retraced my steps. Passing the derelict storefront once more, a solid thump echoed from within, loud, like a weighty box tumbling from a high shelf. I froze mid-stride, mouth instantly dry. The street felt deserted, bathed in the unreliable flicker of a nearby street lamp. Through the dusty window, I peered, eyes struggling to adjust. Darkness reigned, punctuated by the faint silhouettes I knew too well. My pulse pounded, a frantic drumbeat in my neck. Holding my breath, I leaned in, trying to force my vision deeper into the gloom. My focus snagged on a corner near the rear wall. Initially, just a denser patch of shadow, indistinguishable from the rest. But then, it shifted. Not like a person, not with defined limbs or posture. More like a segment of the darkness itself had detached and flowed sideways. A strangled gasp escaped me. My skin went clammy, a sheen of cold sweat breaking across my forehead. Call the police? The thought surfaced, my phone heavy in my pocket. But hesitation rooted me. No visible intruder, no broken glass, no proof beyond a disquieting sensation and a trick of the light perhaps. My throat constricted. My legs felt watery. I backed away, scanning the empty pavement. Utterly alone, utterly exposed. A quick detour into my own shop felt imperative before heading home. I fumbled with the lock, retrieved the forgotten folder, and secured the premises again with record speed, deliberately averting my gaze from the adjacent window. The drive home was a taut affair, hands gripping the wheel too tightly. The memory of that fluid shadow replaying unwelcome behind my eyes. The subsequent days saw me attempting normalcy. Open at 9, assist patrons, exchange pleasantries with Mr. Henderson, who religiously bought spiral notebooks. Yet my thoughts persistently strayed next door. I casually queried a delivery driver. Did he know anything about Abernathy's disappearance? A shrug. Heard the man had personal troubles. Skipped town months ago. No sightings since. When I cautiously mentioned the possibility of nocturnal activity, the drivers offered only a pitying look. Reflections, maybe? His dismissal offered no comfort. I began finding excuses to close earlier, citing fictitious errands, anything to avoid the post-dusk passage past that window. Yet late nights was sometimes unavoidable. On those occasions, emerging into the darkness, my gaze was drawn magnetically to the silent facade. Sometimes a faint internal glow. Sometimes absolute stillness. Sometimes a soft click, a subtle scrape, sounds too ambiguous to be certain. Once, emboldened by frustration, I called out from the sidewalk, "Hello, anyone in there?" My voice betrayed a tremor I despised. Silence answered. After a taut moment, I retreated. After a month, steeped in this low-grade paranoia, weariness set in. Action felt necessary. I contacted my landlord, inquiring about the neighboring property. He confessed ignorance regarding Abernathy's whereabouts or current status, mentioning only a previous property manager who had also lost contact. I relayed my nocturnal observations. The lights, the sounds. He expressed vague concern but pleaded helplessness. "Call the constabulary if you feel unsafe," was his only advice. The prospect of summoning officers based on flickers and feelings felt premature, potentially embarrassing. One crisp autumn evening, a surge of resolve propelled me. Closing around 7, dusk already deepening the street corners, I retrieved a small torch from beneath my counter. Heart thudding, palms damp, I approached the window next door. Pressing my face close to the glass, I switched on the beam. It cut a swathe through the interior darkness, illuminating shelves thick with dust, their metal edges furred with rust. 3, maybe 4, open cartons lay crumpled on the floorboards, filmed with grime. Tattered posters clung precariously to the walls, secured by brittle, yellow tape. The beam revealed only emptiness, decay. Yet, through a hairline crack near the doorframe, a potent smell wafted. Damp earth, mildew, rot. It caught in my throat, making me cough. And then, a distinct tap, soft but undeniable, from somewhere deep inside, like a knuckle rapping lightly on wood or a single deliberate footfall. I jerked back instinctively, my foot catching the uneven lip of the pavement. I stumbled, nearly falling, the torch clattering onto the concrete. I didn't retrieve it. I fled. Sleep became elusive for several nights following. That single tap replayed endlessly, its clarity unnerving. I confided a heavily edited version to Ben, who runs the corner shop down the way, mentioning only the possibility of noises. He chuckled nervously. Rats probably, or a stray cat found a way in. I knew rats. I'd dealt with them at a previous location. This sound felt intentional, but I let him cling to his mundane explanation. Describing moving shadows or phantom lights risked sounding unhinged. Those details remained mine alone. A few days later, driven by a need for tangible answers, I ventured into the rear alleyway during my lunch break. The narrow passage, shared by all the storefronts, smelled of stagnant refuse and stale cooking grease from the nearby eateries. As expected, the abandoned shop possessed a rear metal door. Rust bloomed around its hinges. A heavy chain secured it, fastened with a substantial padlock. Nothing appeared tampered with. The lock gleamed dully, intact. I nudged the door's base with my foot. Solid. No answering echo from within. A brief wave of relief washed over me. Perhaps I was merely spooking myself. That fragile relief shattered a week later. A late customer needing a bulk order of custom forms kept me until 9. Stepping out, locking the gate, my eyes performed their ritual sweep towards the adjacent darkness. The window was opaque, unrevealing, but as I turned to leave, another thump resonated from inside. Louder this time, sharper, my nerves frayed instantly. Keys bit into my palm. I stood frozen, staring at the impassive dirt-streaked glass. Then I saw it, a faint luminescence emanating from behind the counter area. Within? Not bright, more a diffuse, sickly glow. And it was moving, pacing back and forth, a restless light without a visible source. My breath grew shallow, the rush of blood loud in my ears. I took a single, hesitant step closer. A grating sound followed, unmistakable now. Furniture, heavy, being dragged across the floor. That was my limit. I spun around, hurrying towards my car, refusing to look back. The cold night air burned in my lungs. My shoulders remained hunched, tense, every nerve expecting pursuit. A sudden eruption from that silent door. Nothing. Reaching my car, I sat for long minutes, hands trembling on the wheel, my shirt damp beneath my jacket, my mind refusing to quiet. I still haven't alerted the authorities. Perhaps it's the fear of ridicule if they find nothing. Or worse, the fear of what they might find and the consequences of my own morbid curiosity. All I know for certain is the store remains locked, officially unoccupied. Yet, nocturnal stirrings persist. Lights flicker, noises echo in the dead hours. I make a conscious effort to leave promptly now. If late work proves unavoidable, my phone stays clutched in my hand, emergency numbers hovering beneath my thumb. During the day, I sometimes steal glances inside, seeking reassurance in the dusty stillness, hoping it was all just overwrought nerves. But when night falls, and I pass that threshold after locking my own gate, the familiar prickle returns. The conviction that something or someone resides just beyond that grimy pane is inescapable. For now, distance is my strategy, vigilance my shield. I walk quickly past, eyes fixed ahead, offering silent prayers not to witness another anomalous glow, not to hear another inexplicable impact. The wall separating my small shop from that place feels unnervingly thin. Sometimes, late at night, sorting receipts or prepping orders in the quiet solitude, I pause, straining my ears. Do I hear a faint knock? A whisper soft scrape through the plaster? Each time I freeze, heart seizing. I remind myself, no proof, perhaps imagination. Yet the dread remains, a cold weight in my chest whenever I contemplate the silent, watchful presence sharing my small stretch of the avenue. It's probably nothing, I tell myself. Nothing serious. But the fear that tightens its grip as I pass that door at closing time feels terrifyingly real. I just pray it stays on its side of the wall. Anxiety was an unforeseen passenger when my car crunched onto the gravel drive. Belief in the spectral, the uncanny. These were territories I rarely explored, preferring the solid ground of fact, the clear lines of logic. Yet this inheritance, this structure of wood and secrets, radiated a dissonance the moment its facade came into view. Beneath a placid sky, bathed in the unwavering gold of late afternoon, with not a breath of wind to stir the air, goose flesh pebbled my arms. A reflexive wipe of palms against denim did little to dispel the chill. Nerves, I reasoned, simply nerves about assuming ownership of a property utterly unknown, bequeathed by a relative whose existence I'd learned of only through the crisp formality of a solicitor's letter. The house was irrevocably mine. The approach was choked by a defiant surge of waist-high grass and tenacious weeds. I guided my vehicle close to a listing fence, silenced the engine, and stepped into an atmosphere thick with the scent of time and disuse. The perfume of stagnant attics, of places surrendered to dust. It clung, palpable. Paint peeled from the house in sun-bleached curls. Sections of timber sagged, weary from decades of neglect. The keys, cool metal transferred from a lawyer's sterile office, felt alien in my hand. I wrestled with the lock, a succession of futile clicks preceding the final, resonant thud of tumblers yielding. A pause on the threshold, a deliberate intake of breath, and then I crossed into the gloom. Shadows dominated the entrance hall, the floorboards issuing long, mournful groans under the weight of my boots. Dust lay like a fine shroud over every conceivable surface. High above, the ceiling stretched into obscurity, flanking a corridor that plunged towards the building's hidden depths. My flashlight beam sliced through the dimness, revealing corners swallowed by darkness. Each few paces elicited a fresh course of wooden complaint. That initial reconnaissance took me through room after silent room, spectral shapes of furniture draped in white sheets, shelves cluttered with the detritus of a life concluded, a grand staircase ascending into the upper mysteries. The sheer number of chambers felt elusive, resisting a simple count on that first tentative exploration. The remainder of the afternoon became a ritual of unsealing windows, coaxing stale air out and fresher currents in. Amidst this task, the house murmured, scuttling whispers from within the walls, faint thuds from overhead. Rodents, I assured myself, perhaps squirrels colonizing the eaves. Old structures breathe, settle, host tiny lives, entirely normal. Yet a tightness persisted in my chest, an internal clenching I consciously dismissed. I selected a room near the front entrance for my temporary sanctuary, minimizing the need for nocturnal navigation through shadowed passages. Once cleared of the worst dust, it assumed a Spartan utility. Its most comforting feature, a heavy solid timber door that latched securely. The thought of that sturdy barrier between myself and the house's vast unlit expanse offered a sliver of solace. Night descended with swift finality. A small lamp cast a hesitant glow from the bedside table, powered by aged wiring that demanded cautious load management. Dinner was a perfunctory affair, consumed on a folding chair unearthed from a corner, my provisions spread around me. Silence reigned, punctuated only by the occasional arthritic creak of the old structure settling. No television offered distraction. leaving only the whisperings of ancient walls. A familiar flicker of unease returned, which I countered by forcing my thoughts toward the mundane. Errands pending, the daunting list of potential repairs, the timeline for deciding this property's fate. Sell or stay. Exhaustion eventually claimed me, pulling me into a shallow, fitful sleep plagued by tossing and frequent awakenings. Around the stroke of midnight, a sound jolted me upright, heart instantly hammering. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy treads echoing from the hallway directly outside my door. I became utterly still, straining to hear, breath held captive. Silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then they resumed. A measured pacing, back and forth, back and forth. My pulse surged, a frantic drum against my ribs. My mouth turned to dust. Imagination, my mind insisted. Fatigue. But the sound possessed an undeniable clarity, a solid weight on the aged floorboards. Abruptly, it ceased. I remained rigid, eyes fixed on the unseen ceiling, too profoundly unnerved to investigate. No sliver of light penetrated the gap beneath the door, offering no clue to the source. Sleep, thereafter, was a lost cause. Every closing of my eyes conjured the image of a silent watcher just beyond the wood. Morning revealed nothing amiss. The house slumbered in its dust, undisturbed. No footprints marred the floors. No sign of forced entry presented itself. The doors and windows remained steadfastly locked. Old timbers shifting, I rationalized again, a tired mind conjuring phantoms. The day was spent unloading the rest of my gear and venturing into the upper levels. A library materialized, its shelves bowing under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A study contained a vast, imposing desk strewn with yellowed papers. A cramped attic yielded towering stacks of sealed boxes. No overt manifestation of the strange occurred, yet the air remained thick, stagnant, and the undercurrent of disquiet never truly subsided. That evening, determined to preempt the fear, I positioned another lamp in the hallway near my room, hoping its steady illumination would banish the shadows and my anxiety. After a solitary meal, I secured my bedroom door, extinguished the light within, and lay watching the faint yellow strip of luminescence beneath the threshold. Every nerve felt taut, attuned to the slightest noise. It began again, near the same hour. The slow, rhythmic footfalls resonated through the floor. Bile rose in my throat. The steps drew nearer, paused directly outside my door, then receded. Sweat beaded on my temples. My legs coiled instinctively. I waited, suspended in dread, for their return. They obliged. The deliberate pacing resumed, a relentless patrol. Designed, it felt, to fray my sanity. My heart felt lodged in my throat. I stared, mesmerized by the doorknob, anticipating its turn, but it remained motionless. The footsteps continued their unnerving cadence for perhaps 10 minutes before fading into silence. I strained to hear breathing, a cough, any human artifact. Nothing. A desperate urge to fling open the door warred with a paralytic fear. My mind raced, projecting terrifying possibilities onto the darkness beyond. I remained entombed in my bed until the first gray light of dawn. In the morning, the hallway lamp still burned, but it sat askew on its small table, nudged from its position. I knew, with chilling certainty, I hadn't left it that way. My hand trembled as I righted it. Another meticulous check of every window, Every portal, every conceivable point of ingress yielded nothing, all secure. The dust along the hallway skirting boards remained stubbornly inscrutable, offering no clear print. The puzzle deepened. Breakfast was tasteless, consumed mechanically. A more exhaustive search felt imperative. I armed myself with a heavy flashlight and a crowbar brought for potential repairs, feeling a fool yet simultaneously sensing a genuine threat. Closets yawned open. Spaces behind hulking furniture were probed. I even tapped walls, listening for hollow secrets. My search led me again to the second floor, to the end of a long, dim corridor where a particular door commanded attention. It was fashioned from thick dark wood and secured with a heavy rusted padlock. My initial attempts to pry it open with the crowbar proved futile. The metal groaned, but the lock held fast. No key on my ring offered passage. I peered intently, listening, but detected no sound or movement from within. I resolved to return, perhaps with more persuasive tools or the aid of a locksmith. Late afternoon found me drained, physically and emotionally. I retreated to the front porch, sipping water, attempting to impose order on the chaos in my head. The urge to flee was potent. Find a sterile motel room, hire professionals to sift through this inherited enigma. Yet, a stubborn countercurrent held me fast. Running felt like surrender, an abdication to the unknown. Reason argued for squatters, an elaborate prank, but the footsteps, they possessed a weight, a cadence that felt distinctly human, yet eerily not. That evening, technology became my ally. I positioned a small digital camera on a tripod in the hallway, aimed towards my bedroom door, its infrared capability promising vision in the dark. I switched on the hallway lamp, initiated the recording, and retreated behind my own door. This time, I left it unlocked, needing the illusion of a quick escape should the need arise. I settled onto the bed, attempting to lose myself in one of the library's forgotten novels. My fingers felt clumsy on the pages, my focus fractured. Giving up, I switched off my bedside lamp, leaving only the faint underdoor glow from the hall. Silence stretched for a couple of hours. My eyelids grew heavy, consciousness beginning to fray at the edges. Then, the familiar sound, the slow, pausing tread. Instantly alert, I pulled the thin blanket higher, my breathing shallowing, the impulse to leap up to confront, warred again with immobilizing fear. A faint click sounded nearby, followed by the slow groan of my own door easing open, perhaps an inch. The footsteps continued their passage. My muscles locked. Through the narrow gap, a sliver of the illuminated hallway was visible, and across it, something moved, casting a fleeting, distorted shadow onto my floor. My pulse hammered in my ears. The shadow withdrew, the door whispered shut. I struggled to draw a normal breath, my chest constricted. Long after the footfalls faded, I lay rigid, staring into the darkness. Dawn arrived, and with it, the camera. It had recorded faithfully through the night. I stopped the capture and began playback. Empty hallway footage scrolled past until I reached the approximate time. The microphone had picked up the creaking floorboards clearly. Then a flicker at the edge of the frame. A silhouette flowed from one side to the other, pausing, rewinding. Playing in slow motion revealed a dark, vaguely human form materializing on the left, lingering momentarily near my door, then melting out of sight on the right. Details remained elusive, a frustrating blur, but the shape was undeniably present. A cold knot formed in my stomach. My mouth felt parched. Repeated viewings yielded no further clarity. My hands shook as I switched the camera off. Fueled by a mixture of dread and determination, I embarked on another, more aggressive search. Flashlight, hammer, crowbar, my companions in this unsettling quest. The attic first. Cobweb-draped beams, forgotten trunks, dusty boxes, but no plausible hiding place for a living person. Then back to the second-floor enigma, the locked door. I struck the padlock sharply with the hammer. The metal rang dully but held firm. The surrounding wood showed no sign of yielding. Prying with the crowbar seemed likely to cause significant damage, a prospect I hesitated to embrace. Could there be another access point? Circling the house's exterior on the second-floor level, I counted windows, correlating them with the interior layout. One window, corresponding precisely to the locked room's location, was boarded shut from the inside. The planks were aged but securely fastened. Defeated for the moment, I continued my sweep, peering behind drapes, into cavernous wardrobes, beneath dust-laden beds. The house offered no intruders, only its heavy silence. Evening settled, finding me slumped in the front living room, a solitary lamp pushing back the encroaching gloom. Muscles ached with fatigue and tension. One more night, one more attempt to understand. I resolved to keep vigil in the hallway itself, to witness whatever haunted these corridors with my own eyes. I dragged a chair near the main staircase, positioning it to face the passage where the footsteps were most often heard. Flashlight and camera rested beside me. A floor lamp provided a pool of low light. Hours crept by. My posture stiffened. My head began to droop with exhaustion. Then, sometime deep in the post-midnight quiet, a distinct creak shattered the stillness. My eyes snapped open. I swept the flashlight beam down the hall. Empty. Another groan, this time from behind me. I spun around. The corridor leading towards the locked room stretched vacant as shadowed. My throat constricted. Rising, flashlight held before me like a talisman. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I began to walk. Each step felt tentative, amplifying the silence. Sweat slicked my palms. I moved down the hallway, checking each doorway as I passed. The locked door loomed at the corridor's terminus. Pressing my ear to the cold wood, I listened. At first, only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then something else. Faint, indistinct, like a dry scratching or a soft sliding sound from within. A wave of nausea washed over me. I recoiled, bathing the door in the flashlight's beam. The padlock gleamed dully, unchanged. I reached out, jiggled it, solid. And then I froze. A shadow detached itself from the wall to my right, gliding along the plaster. It wasn't mine. Taller, more fluid, it seemed to flow rather than step. My legs turned to water. I swung the light, but the space was empty. An icy fist of fear clenched around my neck and shoulders. Words died in my throat. I stumbled backward, retreating towards the staircase, flashlight beam trembling. Turning, I half fell down the stairs, landing heavily on the lower floor. I scrambled into my designated bedroom, slammed the door, shot the bolt, and collapsed against it, breath coming in ragged gasps. For a long while, I stayed there, listening. Silence. Eventually, I crawled onto the bed, staring sightlessly at the ceiling, sleep utterly banished by raw terror. Morning light, filtering through the grimy windows, brought not peace, but a fragile respite. I needed distance. Driving into the nearest town, I found refuge in the anonymous bustle of a small coffee shop. For hours, I sat nursing lukewarm coffee, trying to formulate a plan. Call the authorities? Report what exactly? Unsubstantiated feelings, spectral footsteps, a blurry video. Hire someone to breach the locked door, or simply walk away, consigning this unsettling inheritance to memory. But a deeper insistence resonated within me, a need for answers. The locked room, the nocturnal wanderer, they exerted a gravitational pull. In town, I purchased tools, including a heavy-duty bolt cutter. Evening shadows were lengthening as I returned, stepping back across the threshold. The house felt poised, expectant. I deposited the new tools in the living room, my hands betraying a slight tremor. I took several deep, steadying breaths. The logical course was to wait for daylight, for the perceived safety of the sun, before confronting that final door. But my nerves were frayed thin. Another night felt like an insurmountable ordeal. Even now, writing this, I sit in the living room's island of lamplight, the tools resting near my feet. Faint noises drift from upstairs, the settling groans of old timber, or something more deliberate. My pulse quickens with each indeterminate thump, each soft scrape. My gaze strays constantly to the staircase, half expecting a silhouette to coalesce in the shadows. My throat is dry. A dull ache throbs behind my temples. Resolve wars with primal fear. I am determined to unearth the secret this house guards so jealously. If there is a presence here, I intend to face it, to understand the source of its restless haunting. Dawn feels an eternity away. Until then I wait, listening, fighting the instinct to flee. This house has a story trapped within its walls, and I'm compelled to force it into the light. The city baked under an unforgiving sun. The afternoon Elias claimed the keys to the cinder street flat. Rivulets of sweat traced paths down his temples as worn suitcases groaned over scarred parquet flooring, each scrape echoing in the sudden stillness. An aroma, thick and ancient, compounded of settled dust, incipient mildew, and tired damp plaster, met him the moment he crossed the threshold. He'd initially waved it away. The rent was a steal, a necessary compromise for the coveted downtown pulse, everything within arm's reach. His initial inspection had revealed the expected flaws of age: hairline fractures spidering across walls, paint peeling near the high ceilings like sunburnt skin, a subtle cant to the bedroom floorboards. Nothing screamed alarm, merely the quiet decay of an old structure. Possessions found their corners. A nook claimed for the computer's glow, and Elias resolved to acclimatize to the mustiness, seeking only the simple solace of stillness after the move. Hours later, solitude was punctuated by a faint scritch-scratch from the living area, not loud, but insistent. He froze mid-stride in the hallway, head cocked, listening. Silence answered. Cautiously, he entered the living room. Drawn curtains muted the afternoon light, casting long, soft shapes. On the far wall, a tremor of shadow seemed to recoil as he entered. a fleeting dance he ascribed to the play of light through the grimy window pane, or perhaps just the frayed edges of moving day nerves. Sleep proved elusive that first night, swallowed by an oppressive silence broken only by the metronomic torture of a leaky bathroom tap. The relentless blink, blink, blink drilled into his consciousness. Finally rising, he padded into the small tiled space, wrenching the faucet tight. Turning back towards the hallway, a flicker, a human-shaped void against the pale doorframe, darker than the ambient gloom. A gasp hitched in his throat. His hand slapped the light switch, flooding the passage with stark illumination. Empty. Adrenaline surged, a metallic taste in his mouth, his breath coming fast and shallow. Exhaustion, he told himself fiercely. Just exhaustion. The days bled into a week punctuated by a growing symphony of the unseen. Delicate wrappings originating from deep within the plaster. Floorboards sighing under phantom weight, tiny sharp ticks near the skirting boards as if insects were signaling Morse code. He patrolled the rooms, searching for the mundane culprits. Rodents, perhaps, but found no telltale droppings, no shredded nesting materials. Mr. Abernathy, the landlord, had mentioned the building's venerable age, but nothing about vermin. It happened late one afternoon, knees pressed against the cool kitchen linoleum as he scrubbed away years of grime. A breath feathered against his ear, a susurrus so faint it barely registered, yet undeniably close, intimate. It originated from directly behind him. He spun around, rag clutched tight. Nothing. Just the empty doorway, the silent apartment. Gooseflesh pebbled his arms. His pulse thudded a heavy rhythm against his eardrums. A draft, he reasoned desperately, the wind finding a crack near the window. Elias clung to reason, a man anchored in logic, dismissing ghost stories as fanciful fluff. Everything he firmly believed bowed to scientific explanation. Yet this apartment gnawed at his certainty, an insidious counterpoint to his rational mind. At unpredictable moments, peripheral flickers resolved into fleeting silhouettes melting through doorways, or shadows would detach themselves from stationary objects and glide across a wall. Even when he stood perfectly still, alone, each instance tightened a cold fist around his chest. He'd whip his head around, eyes scanning corners, peering into closets, half expecting to find an intruder. The thought that someone else possessed a key prompted him to change the lock, an act of practical caution. It altered nothing. The furtive noises continued. The shadows remained loyal to the edges of his sight. He sought refuge in activity, organizing shelves, rearranging furniture until the layout felt less alien, imposing his own order on the space. One afternoon, Hammer poised to drive a nail into the living room wall. An impossible chill caressed his left side. A distinct pocket of unnatural cold in the still warm air. No window stood open. The ancient air conditioner was dormant. He froze, hammer held aloft, arm rigid, breath caught in his chest. The cold spot lingered, palpable, then dissipated as swiftly as it had arrived. He finished hammering the nail, his hand trembling slightly, noticing fresh beads of sweat on his brow despite the moderate temperature. Nightfall amplified the apartment's disquiet. Low thuds resonated from within the walls, a muffled internal percussion, like someone gently knocking from the other side of the plaster. Sometimes, movement ghosted at the edges of his vision, prompting him to flick on the television, hoping the noise and light would banish the unease. It only sharpened his anxiety. Once, roused by a soft shuffling sound just outside his bedroom door, he rose, heart pounding. He crept towards it, reached for the knob, took a steadying breath, and pulled it open. The hallway stretched before him, vacant and silent under the dim overhead light he'd left on. He stood there, arms prickling, fingertips tingling with residual tension. "Hello?" he whispered into the stillness. Only silence answered. One evening, driven by a restless curiosity, he decided to investigate the small, neglected storage room tucked away at the hall's terminus. A single, naked bulb cast weak, sallow light on walls significantly older, more deeply stained than the rest of the apartment. Inside lay a broken chair draped in cobwebs, disintegrating cardboard boxes, and a thick carpet of dust. He sifted through the detritus, uncovering brittle, yellowed newspapers from decades past, scanning headlines for any hint of tragedy or peculiarity. Nothing alarming surfaced. He checked the door. It locked securely from the inside, ruling out casual squatters. Then, without preamble, the light bulb above him flickered violently, sputtered, and died, plunging the cramped space into absolute blackness. Panic seized his chest. He fumbled for his phone, thumb swiping frantically to activate the flashlight. The beam sliced through the oppressive dark, illuminating, for a stark, terrifying heartbeat, a hunched, featureless silhouette shrinking into the far corner. He stumbled back, breath sawn in his throat. As the light steadied on the spot, the shape was gone. He fled the room, slamming the door shut behind him. In the ensuing days, Elias waged a war of rationalization. It had to be exhaustion, the stress of a new environment manifesting in sensory tricks. The apartment was inherently creepy. Perhaps he was projecting his expectations onto ambiguous stimuli, but the persistent scrutiny began to wear him down. The unshakable sensation of unseen eyes tracking his movements. He'd be brushing his teeth, staring into his own reflection, and feel a prickling awareness on his back, rinsing. He'd glance up again and catch a flicker of motion in the mirror's background. A spin revealed only the blank wall, the slightly ajar bathroom door. His pulse would jackhammer, his breathing turn ragged, a temporary numbness creeping into his arms. He experimented with sleeping under the full glare of the overhead light for a few nights. It offered no solace. It merely sculpted the room's corners into deeper, more animate pools of darkness. Shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch whenever his gaze lingered too long. Now and then, faint whispers seemed to drift from the hallway. Not words, but breathy murmurs, hushed exhalations just below the threshold of comprehension. He'd rise, press his ear against the cool wood of his bedroom door, straining to decipher them. Nothing coherent ever emerged, yet the feeling of a presence on the other side was undeniable. After a few such episodes, he stopped opening the door, choosing instead to stand rigid, listening until the elusive sounds faded. He invited his friend Julian over one Saturday, hoping for external validation or perhaps dismissal. Julian arrived, surveyed the place with a wry grin, quipping about horror film aesthetics. He listened patiently to Elias's hesitant accounts but heard no spectral whispers, saw no dancing shadows himself. He shrugged, suggesting fatigue was the likely culprit. Yet, Elias noticed him glance uneasily towards the ceiling corners more than once. Julian did mention feeling a peculiar draft near the living room window that made the hairs on his arms stand up, though he quickly attributed it to poor insulation in the old building. When Julian left, Elias felt a confusing mix of disappointment and strange sort of relief. He wasn't entirely alone in sensing something, however minor. But it solved nothing. The noises and shadows returned with the evening gloom. Sometimes, lying in bed on the cusp of sleep, he'd hear a distinct scrape from beneath the floorboards. It sounded chillingly, like fingernails clawing desperately at the underside of the wood. The first time it happened, he bolted upright, slapping the bedside lamp on, standing exposed in his boxers, ears straining to pinpoint the source. It lasted mere seconds, then ceased, leaving only the ringing silence and the frantic thrum of his own heart. He tentatively tapped the floor with his foot. No response echoed back. He climbed back into bed, eyes wide, staring sightlessly at the textured ceiling until dawn. His grasp on the mundane loosened. Simple details took on sinister significance. Why did the bedroom temperature plummet unpredictably for minutes at a time, independent of the thermostat? How did the closet door, which he distinctly remembered shutting firmly, stand ajar come morning? And his keys inexplicably migrated from their designated hook by the door to the center of the kitchen counter overnight, with no memory of him moving them. By the third week, a perpetual knot had tightened between his shoulders. Food lost its appeal. His appetite vanished. He began tracing long, aimless circuits through the neon-lit downtown streets, after work seeking refuge in the noise and anonymity of crowds, delaying his return to the apartment until the last possible moment. The city's bustle, its tangible life, became a temporary balm. But eventually, inevitably, he had to go back. One night, drifting on the couch around 2 a.m., a clear, deliberate rap, rap, rap echoed from the living room wall beside him. Not a creak, not a settling sound, but knuckles on plaster. He shot to his feet, marched to the wall, pressed his ear against the cool surface, heart hammering against his ribs. Hesitantly, almost defiantly, he knocked back 3 times. Silence. He turned away, muscles coiled tight. Then a single sharp knock erupted precisely where his head had been pressed against the wall just moments before. He spun around, nearly stumbling. A strangled cry caught in his throat. A chill, sharp as ice water, spread across his shoulders. "Who's there?" he managed, his voice a low, trembling wreck. No one answered. After that night, he slept with a small lamp burning in the hallway. His bedroom door left slightly ajar. It offered marginal comfort, reducing the starkness of the shadows, though the feeling of presence remained. Leaving for work each morning brought an intense wave of relief, a desperate gladness to be surrounded by the mundane reality of colleagues and office chatter. He manufactured reasons to stay late, burying himself in projects, anything to shorten the hours spent within those four walls. One Thursday evening, resolve hardening, Elias decided he needed answers, or at least context. He called Mr. Abernathy, who met his cautious inquiries about the apartment's history and previous tenants with audible impatience. "It's an old building, Mr. Vance," the landlord sighed, "bound to have its creaks and groans, perfectly normal." He flatly denied any knowledge of anything remotely supernatural ever being reported. Elias, sensing the conversational dead end but persistent, asked for permission to check the basement. Abernathy reluctantly agreed, providing a key and curt instructions to be brief. Flashlight in hand, Elias descended into the subterranean chill. The beam cut through swirling dust motes, illuminating damp concrete walls splotched with fungal blooms and festooned with cobwebs. He inspected rusting pipes, peered into forgotten corners filled with debris. He found nothing overtly unusual, yet the unshakable conviction that someone stood just behind him, watching, plagued his every step. He spun around repeatedly, heart leaping, finding only empty, stagnant air. After 10 minutes of mounting dread, he retreated back upstairs. That night, attempting to lose himself in a book on the couch, the living room lamp began to flicker intermittently. Soft, furtive footsteps echoed from overhead, despite the landlord's assurance that the unit above was vacant. Around midnight, a distinct hinge whined in the hallway. Elias rose silently, crept to his front door, and pressed his eye to the distorting lens of the peephole. The dimly lit corridor outside appeared empty. And then, impossibly close, seemingly emanating from just beyond the wood, that sibilant, chilling whisper he'd heard before. A jolt went through him so profound he nearly buckled. His pulse roared in his ears, his hands shook uncontrollably. He stumbled back from the door, mouth suddenly bone dry, and stood frozen in the center of his living room for a long time, waiting for the sound to cease. Eventually, it did. He has resided here for nearly a month now. The peripheral phantoms remain loyal companions. The murmurs persist at unpredictable intervals. Every time the thought of breaking the lease surfaces, the reality of the city's exorbitant rents anchors him here. It's all in his head, he repeats like a mantra. Stress, lack of sleep. Yet the chronic tension gripping his body feels undeniably real. His shoulders ache constantly. His stomach clenches with every unexplained shuffle in the hall. Every creak from the floorboards above. Sleep remains a fractured, restless state, punctuated by knocks, clicks, and the occasional disembodied whisper near his bed. He wishes he could offer a conclusion, a neat explanation uncovered. He hasn't found one. He still conducts his patrols, flipping switches, peering into shadows, hoping to catch the phenomenon in the act. No face has materialized, nothing solid, but the movement is undeniable. And sometimes, a fleeting contact, a soft, cool pressure brushing his arm, the ghost of fingers grazing the back of his neck. When that happens, his vision momentarily blurs, his breath catches, a dizzying wave washing over him. Is he losing his grip? Or is there truly something dwelling within these walls that defies ordinary logic? His phone has become a permanent fixture in his hand or pocket. Part of him yearns to record the noises, to capture proof. But the idea of playing back a spectral whisper, of confirming the unbelievable, fills him with a visceral dread. He fears hearing something truly articulate, something undeniable he cannot handle. He is weary of the constant vigilance, the reflexive recoiling from every sound, the endless cycle of second-guessing his own senses. Yet, beneath the fear, a sliver of morbid fascination persists. The unsettling possibility of something existing beyond the known. Tonight, he sits on the couch again, fingers flying across the keyboard, needing to exercise these experiences onto the screen. The lamp beside him burns steady for now. The kitchen is a dark void. The bathroom door is firmly closed. He wears a hoodie despite the room's temperature, warding off a localized chill near his arms. His ears are tuned instruments, straining against the silence, analyzing every groan of the building's ancient bones. His gaze flicks compulsively towards the hallway entrance, half expecting a shadow to glide past. The refrigerator's hum makes his heart flutter. The air conditioner clicking on causes him to tense. No whispers yet tonight, but the night is young and he knows the potential always lingers. He remains uncertain about staying. This place is exacting a toll, grinding him down. His ingrained skepticism endures, but it's buried deep beneath the accumulated weight of lived moments, of inexplicable sensations. He wants to believe in faulty wiring, old pipes settling, the brain's capacity for self-deception under duress. But late at night, enveloped in the solitude, the fine hairs on his neck prickle without cause. He sees those fleeting, ill-defined shapes flicker in the corners of his eyes. He hears those soft, deliberate clicks within the walls. It's not a narrative he ever envisioned himself inhabiting. Yet here he is, navigating it day by day, night by night, perpetually waiting for some form of resolution or perhaps escalation. For now, he copes. Doors locked, keys accounted for, phone within reach. Peace is a distant memory, but sanity remains a goal he fiercely defends. If something shares this space, it hasn't offered physical harm. It merely persists, a constant chilling reminder, night after night, that it's there, lurking just beyond the veil of perception. And Elias is left perpetually wondering when and how it will choose to show itself again. Relief first bloomed, fragile as a moth's wing, when twin stars ignited in the rear-view glass. The second pair, though, felt different, a prickle of unease, a wrongness in their dance. By the third, spectral glare, certainty seized me, cold and absolute. These weren't beacons of aid, but heralds of a dread eclipsing all known fear. I am Ilara. What began as a pilgrimage to familial warmth, a Thanksgiving journey toward my parents' embrace, twisted into the labyrinthine nightmare that still colonizes my sleep. Julian, my husband, sat beside me. Our children, Leo, a thoughtful 10, and little Maya, barely 7, breathed the deep, even breaths of slumber in the back. A dozen times we traced this route, but never swallowed by such profound night. Julian's work had tethered us late, launching us onto the long, desolate artery, connecting distant towns well after the witching hour. We traded the helm, Julian and I, battling the encroaching weariness. My hands were on the wheel when the machine beneath us faltered. A cough, a metallic gasp, and our momentum began to bleed away. "What is it?" Julian murmured, surfacing from a shallow doze. My foot pressed down, seeking power that wasn't there. The car surrendered, gliding onto the gravel shoulder where the profound, ink-black dark crowded the windows. Julian turned the key. Silence, then the futile percussion of a dying mechanism. Nothing, he breathed, phone already in hand. Predictably, no signal. A knot tightened low in my belly. We were stranded, miles dissolving into emptiness behind and before us. The highway a ribbon lost in the void. That's when, far down the asphalt behind us, I saw it. A pinprick of light. Hope surged, swift and unbidden. "Look, Julian," I pointed. "Someone's coming." We scrambled out, two figures waving frantically against the oppressive backdrop. Yet, as the lights swelled, a dissonance crept in. They burned too fiercely, perched unnaturally high, their approach a drunken weave across the lane. The knot in my gut constricted. Something felt predatory in their erratic glide. Just as the vehicle loomed, it veered violently, shying at the last moment, accelerating past us into the waiting dark. Julian stared after it, bewildered. What in God's name? Before words could form, another set of beams painted the road ahead. This time, a conventional sedan drifted to a halt beside us. An elderly man, his face etched with lines of road weariness, lowered his window. "Trouble?" His voice was gravelly. "Our car just died," I hurried, relief making my voice thin. "Could we possibly use your phone to call for assistance?" His gaze flickered from concern to something sharper, colder. Apprehension. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, eyes darting towards the empty stretch behind us. "Get gone, quickly." Julian stepped closer. "Why? What's wrong?" The man swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "This road, stories whisper, vanishings, odd lights. It ain't safe after sundown." Ice traced my vertebrae. "Stories? What kind of things?" But his window was already gliding shut. "Can't linger. Wish you well." He accelerated away, leaving us marooned again, exchanging glances freighted with a nascent terror. What had he meant? And what horrors waited in the dark? He fled. And then, the third manifestation. Not distant, but suddenly there. Impossibly close, twin infernos rushing directly at us with predatory velocity. "Inside now!" My voice ripped through the stillness. I threw open my door, diving in as Julian scrambled beside me. A monstrous shape thundered past, the rush of its passage rocking our small car, missing us by a breath. The jolt woke the children. "Mama? Papa?" Leo's voice was small, threaded with fear. "What's going on?" "Just car trouble, darling," I lied, forcing calm into my tone, even as my eyes found the rear-view mirror. More lights. Not one pair, but a constellation of them, blooming in the distance, converging on our position. "Julian," I breathed, the word trembling. "We have to move." His face was a stark mask in the dashboard's faint glow. He nodded, turning the key again. I watched the approaching lights swell, terror tightening its grip. They weren't cars. Some rode impossibly high, others skimmed the asphalt. Their movement was fluid, uncanny, a pack weaving through the darkness. Shapes, vast and ill-defined, seemed to writhe in the spaces between the beams. A cough, a sputter, then blessed ignition. The engine caught, roared defiance. Julian slammed the gear shift, tires spitting gravel as we surged onto the highway. "Mama, I'm scared," Maya wept from the back. "It's all right, little bird," I soothed, reaching back, my hand finding hers, even as the mirror reflected our pursuers, gaining relentlessly. Now, I could discern forms keeping pace beside the lights, hulking silhouettes that shambled with unnatural speed. Julian pushed the engine until it screamed, a thin metallic wail against the night. But the gap narrowed inexorably. With the lights came a sound, a subsonic thrumming that resonated deep within my chest, vibrating through bone and sinew. "What are those things?" Leo whispered, his face pressed to the rear glass. "Don't look back," I commanded, my voice sharper than intended. "Just don't look." The thrumming intensified, swallowing the engine's cry, the rush of air becoming the only reality. It saturated the world, a physical presence that made my skull ache, my vision swim, then void. Utter blackness crashed down, our headlights vanished, the dashboard died, the pursuing eyes winked out simultaneously. We were suspended in absolute soundless dark. A heartbeat of silence. Then, searing illumination erupted from above, bathing the car's interior in merciless white. It was agony to the eyes. I clamped mine shut. A sickening lightness bloomed beneath us. We were ascending, lifting free of the earth. Maya and Leo screamed, raw terror. Julian shouted words lost in the overwhelming drone that now filled everything. My ears popped violently. A crushing weight settled on my chest, stealing breath. Just as consciousness threatened to fray, as oblivion beckoned, it ended. The light, the sound, the impossible ascent, gone in a blink. I risked opening my eyes. Darkness, but the familiar darkness of the night. We were back on the road, engine humming softly, as if wrenched from a dream. The highway ahead lay vacant, mundane. "Everyone all right?" My voice was a dry rasp. Tremulous confirmations echoed from Julian, from the back seat, physically intact, yet fractured within. Adrift in the wake of impossibility. "What was that?" Leo breathed. "Was it spaceships?" "I don't know, my love," I admitted, the truth feeling utterly inadequate. "I truly don't know." Silence became our companion for the remainder of the drive. Each approaching pair of headlights, a jolt to our shattered nerves. But the night offered no further anomalies. Dawn was painting the sky in bruised pastels when we finally reached the sanctuary of my parents' home, hollowed out by exhaustion and bewilderment. In the days that followed, we wrestled with the unreality. We scoured the digital ether for echoes of our experience, finding only whispers, vague local legends about that desolate stretch of road. Nothing commensurate with the violation we'd endured. Reporting it felt futile. What agency investigates the impossible? What evidence could we offer besides our shared trauma? The memory, however, became an unwelcome tenant. Nightmares plagued the children for months. Julian and I developed an aversion to nocturnal travel. The innocuous gleam of headlights in the mirror became for me a permanent trigger, a portal to that abyss. Years have spun away since that night, and the terror has never revisited us in such stark form. Yet, sometimes, driving beneath a starless sky, a flicker in the rear view, a pair of lights behaving oddly, will transport me instantly back. The vibration in my bones, the ice of pure fear. What were they? Visitors from afar? Entities bleeding through from some adjacent reality? Or something more primal, nameless, dwelling in the vast unlit corners of existence? The question remains unanswered, perhaps unanswerable. But this I carry as certainty. The darkness between towns, between streetlights, is not inert void. It watches, it waits, and sometimes it reaches. All one can do then is grip the wheel, hold your breath, and hope for dawn. So, should you find yourself on a lonely road, swallowed by the night and twin lights bloom in your mirror, look closely, observe their dance, for they might be carrying far more than just another soul passing through the darkness. For 3 days, the envelope lay like a dormant accusation on my kitchen counter before courage finally surfaced. Uncle Silas was gone. He'd bequeathed me his cabin, nestled somewhere deep in Montana's sprawling wilderness. 15 years had dissolved since I'd last seen him. A ghost from a childhood Christmas when I was 12. Now, at 27, adrift in the wake of his passing, I stood as his sole beneficiary. My resignation landed on the desk at the Minneapolis insurance firm with a quiet thud, severing ties to a future already feeling like a dead end. I pointed the car west, devouring 20 hours of asphalt, punctuated only by the hiss of gas pumps and the bitter solace of roadside coffee. Late October, winds flung cascades of brittle leaves across the desolate highway ribboning before me. The GPS voice, increasingly insistent, guided me onto progressively narrowing veins of road until finally, a deeply rutted track swallowed the car, plunging me into a dense cathedral of pines. Through the skeletal fingers of the trees, the cabin materialized against the bruised canvas of sunset. It loomed larger than imagined. 2 stories of seasoned timber, its roof pitched steeply against unseen snows. A generous porch gazing out over the still, dark eye of a lake. A thick carpet of fallen leaves muffled the wooden steps. As the lawyer's email had promised, the key rested beneath an unconvincing imitation stone beside the heavy front door. Inside, a pervasive shroud of dust muted everything. Uncle Silas had passed 6 months prior, yet the stillness spoke of a much longer abandonment. Furniture, substantial and likely hand-hewn, stood sentinel under the grey veil. A commanding stone hearth anchored the main room. In the kitchen, cupboards held dishes. The pantry still stocked with tins, relics of an interrupted life, as if he'd merely stepped out, intending swift return. My duffel bags thumped up the stairs behind me to the primary bedroom. The mattress lay starkly bare, awaiting the linens I'd brought. By the time the bed was made and a few clothes unpacked, profound darkness had clamped down outside. The wind, gaining strength, sang through the eaves, coaxing groans and creaks from the cabin's old bones. That's when the first thread of sound reached me. A susurrus so faint it felt like a figment. The barest exhalation of speech just beneath the threshold of hearing. Words remained elusive. I crept to the bedroom doorway, straining to listen. Only the wind's mournful dialogue with the pines answered. Descending the stairs to coax life into the fireplace, I dismissed it. The natural settling of an aged structure. Tinder flared, and soon a respectable fire cast flickering shadows. I was coaxing warmth into a can of soup on the archaic gas range when motion snagged the corner of my eye. A silhouette sliding past the kitchen window's black pane. I whirled, heart hammering. Nothing but my own reflection stared back, warped and indistinct in the night-glazed glass. The whispers returned as I ate, closer now, seeming to bleed from the very walls. Still unintelligible, yet undeniably human, a chorus of overlapping murmurs. I rose, circling the room, pressing my ear against the cool, wood-paneled surfaces. The sounds migrated, perpetually originating from just beyond my focus. "Hello!" My voice, thin and reedy, betrayed my fear. "Is anyone here?" Instantaneous silence descended, thick and pregnant with anticipation. Then, at the very edge of my sight line, a shape, tall, stark black, like excised shadow, standing sentinel in the room's far corner. When I snapped my head to confront it directly, the space was empty. Sleep offered little refuge that first night. Each time consciousness threatened to ebb, the whispers would coil back, or a fleeting flicker of movement would tease my peripheral vision. Dawn found me constructing arguments of self-deception. Stress, the marathon drive, the unfamiliar solitude. A cocktail potent enough to conjure phantoms. Daylight hours were spent charting my inheritance. 20 acres encompassed the cabin, mostly dense woodland, fringed by 100 feet of lakefront. A small jetty, weathered but seemingly sound, jutted into the cold, clear water. Behind the main structure, a tool shed housed fishing tackle and basic implements. Everything orderly, preserved despite the evident neglect. The afternoon saw me drive to the nearest settlement, a generous term for the crossroads cluster of a general store, a gas station, and a scattering of dwellings. The young woman behind the store counter brightened at the mention of the old Blackwood place. "Oh, your uncle's cabin?" "Yeah, I remember him. Used to stop by every few weeks for supplies. Then, maybe 3 years back, he just vanished. We didn't know what became of him, till word came he'd passed, way down in Arizona." "Did he ever say why he left?" I ventured. She shook her head, ponytail swaying. "Not a word to me. Got real peculiar near the end, though. Skittish, couldn't meet your eye. Started buying up loads of salt, sage bundles. You know, cleansing stuff. Folks sometimes saw his truck tearing down the highway middle of the night, like the devil himself was chasing him. Groceries acquired, I drove back, her words stirring an uneasy sediment within me. The remaining daylight was dedicated to purging the cabin of its accumulated grime, the physical exertion a welcome distraction. But with the fall of night, the truce ended. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, still frustratingly indistinct but imbued with a pressing urgency that prickled my skin. I blazed every light, attempting distraction via laptop screen, but the Wi-Fi was a ghost signal, my phone clinging precariously to a single bar. The shadow figures proliferated. They materialized in doorways, slid past windows, stood inert in corners, always dissolving under direct gaze but lingering longer at the periphery. I began to count them, an unconscious tally of encroaching dread. 3 distinct forms, then 5, then 7. Around midnight, heavy footfalls echoed on the porch, boots on planking, a slow, deliberate tread pacing from end to end. Heart leaping, I snatched the iron poker from the hearth and moved towards the front door. The steps ceased directly outside. I wrenched the door open, poker held high. Emptiness greeted me. The motion sensor light flooded the yard, revealing nothing amiss. Yet, as I pulled the door shut, the distinct, acrid scent of cigarette smoke, the brand Uncle Silas favored, drifted on the chill air. That night, I slept cocooned in every blanket, bathed in the artificial daylight of every switched-on lamp. The whispers subsided to a background hum, a persistent static that sheer exhaustion eventually allowed me to ignore. Dreams offered no escape, filled with dark forms pressing against frosted glass. Features blurred, but their unified desire chillingly clear. They wanted ingress, and they wanted me expelled. The subsequent days settled into a disquieting rhythm. Under the crisp autumn sun, the cabin regained its skies of tranquility, even beauty. I occupied myself with repairs, banishing dust and cobwebs, striving to imprint my own presence onto the place. But dusk invariably heralded the return of the others. The shadow figures grew bolder, their forms solidifying, remaining visible for longer durations even under scrutiny. Featureless voids shaped like men, they seemed to drink the ambient light. Their movements gained purpose. They congregated in small groups, maintaining a distance yet radiating an unnerving awareness of me. The whispers, too, evolved. Recognizable words surfaced amidst the murmurs, though coherent sentences remained elusive. My name, Leo, surfaced repeatedly, tangled with phrases like, does not belong, compel his departure, and like the previous one, an internal debate, it seemed, regarding my fate. Escalation arrived on the 4th night. I stood at the kitchen sink when, with explosive force, every cabinet door flew open simultaneously, crashing against their frames. Plates and glasses took flight from shelves, shattering on the floorboards around my feet. Scrambling upstairs, I bolted the bedroom door, but the whispers seeped through the solid wood. Leave now, leave now, leave now. The words hammered, distinct and layered in a multitude of voices. The room's temperature plummeted. My breath plumed visibly. One by one, the shadow figures materialized, forming a silent, menacing circle around the bed. 7 of them, tall and utterly still, emanating pure malevolence. trembling fingers fumbled with my phone, dialing the lawyer who'd handled Silas's estate. The cabin, I managed, voice tight, as soon as he picked up. Did my uncle mention problems? Anything strange? A measured pause stretched across the line. I cannot ethically discuss the particulars of your uncle's mental condition in his later years, he stated formally. However, I'm obligated to inform you that the property has demonstrated a pattern of transient ownership. Since 1920, there have been 17 documented proprietors. None remained for more than 4 years. Your uncle resided there for 3 years and 8 months before his relocation. What happened to them? The others? Reasons cited were varied. Nervous collapse, financial ruin, precipitous illness. One owner simply vanished, abandoning all possessions. The property invariably returned to market within a few years, often selling at a substantial deficit. Disconnecting the call, I began frantically stuffing clothes back into my bags. The shadow figures observed, their collective whispers swelling into a deafening roar that vibrated through the room. As I snatched the last items from the dresser, a slip of paper fluttered down. An envelope, yellowed and brittle, addressed to me in my uncle's familiar script. Inside, a single sheet, dated 3 years prior. Leo, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the cabin is yours. For that, I am truly sorry. I should have warned you, but they wouldn't permit it. They watch constantly, listen always. They were anchored here long before us, Leo, and will remain long after we are dust. They resent our presence. They will seek to drive you out, just as they did me, just as they did all who came before. But expulsion is not inevitable. There exists a path to remain, should you possess the will to pay the toll. In the cellar, concealed behind the old water heater, search for a loose stone within the foundation wall. What you require lies beyond it, but choose with certainty, Leo. Absolute certainty. For once the pact is sealed, reversal is impossible. Whatever your decision, forgive me for this burden. Uncle Silas. I stood frozen, rereading the words, the shadows pressing infinitesimally closer. The whispers crescendoed, a furious, unified demand for my departure. Yet beneath the cacophony, almost subliminal, a new voice emerged. My uncle's, uttering words just beyond comprehension. Flashlight beam cutting the subterranean gloom, hands shaking, I descended into the basement. The water heater hulked against the far wall, cloaked in rust and limescale. Squeezing behind it, my fingers traced the rough-hewn foundation stones until one shifted fractionally under pressure. It took my full strength to dislodge it. Within the revealed cavity rested a leather-bound volume, its pages fragile with age. Embossed on the cover, stark and simple, the agreement. Carrying it upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table. The shadow figures drew near, their whispers finally falling silent, replaced by an intense, watchful stillness. I opened the book. The first entry, penned in faded sepia ink, bore the date 1920. I have struck my bargain with the others. They shall suffer my presence here under the conditions herein stated. The subsequent pages chronicled similar entries from each owner, including my uncle. Every resident had negotiated their own accord with the entities claiming dominion over this place. The terms shifted. Offerings of prized possessions immolated under a new moon. Vows of ritualistic acknowledgement. Darker contracts sealed in blood or pain. But the fundamental exchange held constant. The living could endure, but only by rendering tribute to the unseen. My uncle's entry resided near the volume's end. The ink still dark, I offer them my voice. I shall speak only unto them, uttering no word to another living soul for the duration of my tenure here. In return, they will grant me leave to stay. His final years of reclusion, his abrupt departure, suddenly illuminated. He had broken the covenant by leaving. A chilling question surfaced. What forfeiture had that transgression cost him? As I reached the final inscribed pages, the shadow figures converged. Not merely the 7 I'd counted, but dozens more, thronging the cabin's corners, filling the shadowed spaces between furniture, their collective presence thickening the air. The whispers recommenced, altered now, questioning, enticing, proposing terms. I picked up a pen, its tip hovering above a blank waiting page. The cabin, starkly beautiful in the encroaching dawn, was mine by blood and law. Was I truly prepared to surrender it? Yet, what price was too steep for sanctuary? The whispers swelled, insistent, persuasive. The shadows leaned closer, hungry for my proposition. Outside, the wind surged, rattling the window panes as if something sought entry. Or perhaps offered one final chance for escape. I pressed the nib to the paper, the first stroke firm. I, Leo Blackwood, do hereby offer the following bargain. Three nights after the boxes were unpacked, 3 nights settling into the hum and grit of Ashworth Avenue, I saw it. A silhouette etched against the window pane directly opposite mine. Immobile, intent. I'd been adrift in the blue glow of my phone, scrolling numbly through feeds, when some primal instinct tugged my gaze upward. The shape held its ground, a fixed point of observation in the city's restless dark. I blinked, a sharp reflexive action, and the window across the way was empty once more. The following night, it reappeared. Cities have been my backdrop forever. The clamor of New York, Chicago's biting wind, now the perpetual drizzle of Seattle. You absorb the unwritten protocols, the urbanite's creed. Avert your eyes on the train. Feign deafness to the arguments bleeding through plasterboard. And under no circumstances do you fixate on the lit stages of strangers' lives playing out in windows across the street. Yet this presence defied the code. Night after night, it materialized in the identical spot. A study in absolute stillness. Initially, I dismissed it. Seattle thrived on eccentricities. Strange sights were part of the urban tapestry. But a week dissolved into the relentless vigil, and I began charting its appearances. Around 11, give or take, the shadow would coalesce. It would remain utterly motionless for spans ranging from 20 minutes to the better part of an hour. Then abruptly, it would cease to be. Not retreat, not fade. Vanish. My apartment occupies the 8th floor. Its counterpart across the avenue, the Abernathy Tower, is a near twin. The same russet brickwork, the same skeletal fire escapes descending the facade, the same grid of rectangular eyes gazing out. The figure manifested consistently in a window aligned with mine, but 1 story higher. The 9th floor, presumably. 2 weeks deep, I resorted to documentation. My phone yielded only smudged impressions, indistinct blurs where a human form should be, swallowed by the gloom. Video fared no better. The sensor overwhelmed by distance and low light. It was the utter lack of motion that gnawed at me. Humans fidget. They shift their weight, consult glowing screens, scratch phantom itches. This was different. This was the profound stillness of statuary, of something inorganic mimicking life. Binoculars followed. Not for voyeurism, I rationalized, but for reconnaissance, for defense. Knowledge was armor. The first attempt, my hands trembled so violently. The cityscape swam in fractured circles. When the focus finally sharpened, a gasp escaped me, the binoculars nearly slipping from my grasp. The figure wasn't merely dark. It was absolute absence. Not shadow, not clothing, but a perfect humanoid cutout punched into the fabric of the night. No discernible features, no texture. Just pure, unreflective blackness shaped like a person. I took to drawing my blinds, heavy curtains sealing off the view. But the sensation persisted, an unseen weight pressing against my awareness. Lying rigid in bed, tracing patterns on the ceiling, I knew it was out there. If I dared peek through a parting in the fabric, the vigil would be confirmed. Sometimes, a faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tapping seemed to brush against the glass, but investigation always revealed only empty air and the city's distant thrum. A month surrendered to this unnerving routine before my resolve fractured. I sought out Sal, the building superintendent, a relic from an era when supers were custodians of secrets as much as plumbing. He perpetually occupied his small office near the mailboxes, lost in the dog-eared pages of paperback westerns. "Sal," I began, striving for nonchalance. "Quick one for you. Across the way the Abernathy? Who's in the unit facing mine?" He lowered his book, his gaze sharp beneath bushy brows. "9th floor? East side? Empty, son. Whole floor's been vacant for months. Owners are supposed to be renovating." My throat constricted. "How long exactly?" "Let's see," he murmured, scratching at his grizzled beard. "Abernathy changed hands around January. New fella, cleared everyone out, talking big about gutting the place. Ran smack into permit hell, I heard. Been sitting locked up tight since February, maybe March." "You're certain no one's been inside?" "Construction crews were buzzing around early on," Sal conceded. "But they pulled out when the paperwork stalled. Place has been sealed since April, near as I know." He squinted at me. "Why the interest?" "Just curious," I lied, the word tasting like ash. "Appreciate it, Sal." Back upstairs, sweat slicked my palms. I paced the confines of my apartment until dusk bled into true night, then compelled myself towards the window. It was there, but altered. It had drifted closer to the glass, its form starker. I could now discern hands, long, tenebrous fingers splayed against the pane. As I watched, paralyzed, its head tilted, slowly, deliberately, to an angle utterly wrong, like a marionette whose strings had snapped mid-motion. I wrenched the blinds shut. A hotel room materialized online, booked with trembling fingers. Clothes, laptop, essentials snatched in haste before I practically sprinted from the building. The elevator's crawl, an unbearable delay. The night passed in the sterile anonymity of a downtown West Inn. Every creak and groan of the building a potential harbinger. Morning brought the cold light of self-recrimination. Stress, undoubtedly. New city, new pressures, solitude amplifying shadows. My mind, frayed at the edges, was conjuring phantoms. I returned to my apartment, girded with rationality, and there it stood, in the plainness of day. Still at the window, hands pressed flat, head canted at that horrific, impossible angle. The police were my next resort. I reported a possible intruder in the supposedly vacant Abernathy Tower. They promised a patrol car. From my window, I observed 2 officers enter the building opposite. 20 minutes crawled by before my phone rang. We conducted a thorough sweep of the 9th floor, the officer stated, his voice flat, official. Apartments are completely empty. No forced entry, no squatters, 0 signs of occupation. Windows are all secured from the inside. Are you positive about what you saw? I mumbled my thanks and disconnected. The figure was gone, vanished with the officer's departure, but the certainty of its return settled deep in my bones. The remainder of the day dissolved into fruitless online searches. History of the Abernathy, tales of tragedy, accidents, anything to lend context to the impossible. Nothing surfaced beyond the mundane lineage of a 1920s Seattle apartment block. That evening, I waited. 11 o'clock chimed. The window across remained dark. 11:30, still nothing. A fragile tendril of relief began to unspool within me. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps the official presence had spooked whatever it was. Midnight arrived, and the tension finally started to ebb. Then came the tapping. Not from across the street. From my window. Slowly, mechanically, I turned. It was there, inches from my face, separated only by a thin pane of glass. This close, the darkness wasn't uniform. It churned, hinting at depths. A void that seemed to warp the very air around it, pulling the light inwards. I bolted. No keys, no phone. Just the frantic slap of socked feet on the floorboards, down 8 flights of stairs, the elevator unthinkable. I burst onto the street, lungs burning, gulping air. My gaze shot upwards to my own window. Empty, but across the avenue. In the Abernathy Tower, movement flickered. The figure stood in its accustomed place. And as I watched, aghast, it lifted a hand. A wave, not greeting, but demonstration. The limb moved with jerky, disjointed motions, like an ill-rehearsed puppet learning the mechanics of flesh. The following week blurred past from the relative safety of a friend's couch in Ballard. The fiction of a plumbing emergency, my flimsy excuse. Daily calls to the Abernathy's management company yielded little until I reached someone willing to divulge more than platitudes. The renovation delays weren't merely bureaucratic. 3 separate construction crews had walked off the job, citing wider reasons they refused to articulate. Return was inevitable. Friendship has limits, funds have ends. But I went back armed. The thickest blackout curtains money could buy. Additional deadbolts and locks on every window, every door. Security cameras, strategically placed, watching every approach. The first night back, the curtains remained drawn, a heavy velvet barrier. The cameras recorded only stillness. Then, precisely at 11, the apartment plunged into absolute darkness. Not just the lamps. My phone screen died, my laptop winked out, every electronic device silenced simultaneously. In the sudden profound black, I heard it. The soft, deliberate scrape of my blackout curtain sliding open along its rod. Creak by agonizing creak, inch by inch, I was frozen, breath trapped in my chest. When the heavy fabric reached the end of its track, revealing the window and the night beyond, I saw it. Not outside. Inside. Standing between me and the only exit. This time, it spoke. The sound was wrong, layered, discordant. Multiple voices interwoven. Some shrill, some guttural, none human. "Why did you run?" it inquired, the synthesized voices grating. "Don't you want companionship?" My hand closed around the nearest object. A ceramic coffee mug. I hurled it. It sailed directly through the figure's torso, impacting the wall behind with a sharp shatter. The dark shape flickered, like interference on an old screen. "Unkind," it rasped. Its head began to rotate, a slow, impossible swivel, turning 360 degrees while its body remained perfectly stationary. I waited so patiently for an invitation. You never extended one, so I invited myself. My own voice felt alien, scraped raw. "What are you?" "Lonely," it replied, its mouthless face static. "So very empty, this building now. Floor upon floor of silence. Just me. Until you arrived, and you saw me. No one else sees me, only you." It glided a step closer, where its unseen feet met the hardwood. The floor seemed to shimmer, to warp. "Stay back," I choked out, my spine pressed hard against the cool plaster. "But we shall be such friends," it whispered, the layered voices coalescing into something almost like a single entity. "The best of friends, forever." It reached, those elongated fingers stretching towards me. A cold, unlike anything I'd ever known, radiated from it. So intense it burned. Then, the darkness consumed everything. Consciousness returned in a hospital bed 2 days later. A doctor explained. My neighbor heard screams, called emergency services. They'd found me unconscious on my apartment floor, gripped by severe hypothermia, despite the mild spring evening. No evidence of forced entry, nothing missing. All doors and windows securely locked from within. Against medical advice, I discharged myself the moment I could stand. Straight back to the apartment, a frantic packing session. stuffing essentials into my car. I drove south, put in miles between myself and Seattle, not stopping until the cityscape of Portland rose ahead. My new place is ground floor. No tall buildings loom nearby. No windows stare directly into mine. The blinds stay perpetually drawn. Yet, sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I hear it. A faint, familiar tapping against the glass. And when I steel myself, when I force my eyes towards the darkened window, I see it reflected there. A familiar dark shape standing just behind my shoulder. Its head tilted at that broken, impossible angle. It came with me. I understand now. It will always be with me. It spoke the truth about one thing at least. I am the only one who can see it. And it is so terribly, terribly lonely.